Hey there and welcome. My name is Erica. I'm a pediatric developmental therapist and have worked for the early intervention program for over a decade. And today we are covering a pretty big topic, crawling. Now, crawling is one of those milestones that parents often wonder, when should my little one start crawling? And when they do start crawling, they wonder, is my child doing it right? So today we're going to break down crawling, the when, the how, and the why, so that you can understand your baby's movements without any kind of panic. But as always, I like to start with a story. So I remember this one 8-month-old little boy that I was working with. He was scooting on his bottom and rocking back and forth on all fours, but not yet quite crawling. And as you can imagine, his mom was anxious. She thought he was behind because her friend's baby was already crawling and hers wasn't. You gotta love that comparison game, right? So when we observed him, it was myself and a physical therapist, we noticed that he had strong arms, he had good head control, and he had excellent curiosity about his environment. So we just needed to figure out how to get him to have those coordinated leg movement patterns. So through simple guided activities like weight shifts, supported crawling practice, and encouragement, he actually started crawling independently in just a few weeks. It was really incredible to see the confidence that this little guy had after he started crawling. So now let's go ahead and talk about why crawling matters. Well, crawling is actually a major developmental milestone, which we will get into here in a little bit. It actually builds core strength, arm strength, leg strength. It encourages coordination between left and right sides. It supports problem solving, spatial awareness. It prepares your baby for sitting, pulling up, and eventually walking. So remember, every crawl is a step toward independence. And what really matters the most is steady progress, not perfect timing. So let's talk next about when crawling happens. So one of the biggest questions that I get asked from parents is, when is this supposed to happen? Well, most babies begin some form of crawling between 6 and 10 months, but that window is wide for a reason. Some babies actually start early with army crawling or scooting on their belly, while others take their time while building strength, balance, and coordination before actually moving forward. And both can be completely normal. But what matters most isn't the exact month your baby crawls. It is actually that you're seeing steady progress in strength, movement, curiosity, and even that exploration. So let's go ahead and break this down with some crawling myths, okay? This is a little bit long-winded, but I wanted to give you guys as much information as I could. So we're going to start off with a pretty big myth or topic. And I feel like this has two sides to it. Either you are for it or you're against it. And I'm here to tell you that there is actually an in-between. And I put this in here because I believe you, as your little one's parent, you deserve an explanation. So a few years, you may or may not know this, the CDC took crawling off of their milestone checklist, which definitely caused an uproar in the pediatric therapeutic field, rightfully so. Okay. And this next question or myth that I'm going to talk about will explain why it never should have been taken off the milestone checklist. Crawling is such an important milestone. I'm not going to go too much into why the CDC changed their guidelines and all of that, but if you are interested, let me know in the comments below and I would be happy to do a video for you. So here is the myth or the question that comes up often. You can just Google this and you will see parents asking this. You'll see parents telling you what happened to their little one. So let's go ahead and break this down. Crawling must happen before walking. Now, did you hear what I said? Crawling must happen before walking, okay? I'm also going to answer, if my baby isn't crawling yet, something's wrong. And I'm going to answer, crawling has to look like textbook on all fours. So I'm going to answer all of that because this is kind of a long answer. So when you think of crawling, my guess is you picture your little one up on all fours, alternating their hands and legs in a coordinating movement pattern to get from point A to point B, right? When we think of crawling, that's what we think about. So hands and knees crawling in the traditional sense does not actually have to happen before walking. Yes, there are some babies that actually skip the traditional hands and knees coordinated movement crawling pattern. But with that said, it is extremely important that babies experience some form of purposeful floor mobility before walking. That's actually the key distinction here. So this is why it's not black or white, yes or no. There is an in-between, and that's what I want to talk about. So some moms will actually say that their little one went straight to walking and skipped crawling. The truth is, their little one was still doing something in between, even if it didn't look like traditional crawling on all fours. So think about it. Your baby's progression looks like this. They begin good head and trunk strength, right? So they're holding up their head. They're starting to roll on their own. They're sitting in supported sitting. They're eventually sitting in independent sitting. And then what? And then they're just walking? No, there has to be something that happened in between there. And that can include army crawling, belly crawling, scooting, pushing backwards, or maybe even another modified crawling pattern. For example, my granddaughter, she did not traditionally crawl on all fours. She actually crawled on her hands and a knee, and then the other leg was up to kind of move her forward. She's walking now, and it's totally fine. So I say that to let you know there are different forms of crawling, but something has to happen in between the holding the head up, the rolling, the supported sitting, the unsupported sitting. They don't just get up and start pulling to stand. Something has to happen there, even if it's rolling. But if it's rolling, we need to figure out why your little one is having a hard time with that strength, coordinating those hands and leg movements and just rolling around the room. In fact, I got asked by a subscriber on YouTube. She has not responded to me yet, but her question was, my little one was born at 37 weeks and they are 12 months old now and not crawling. And so my response to her, it actually brought up a lot of questions for me. First of all, her little one was 37 months, so we do not adjust for prematurity, but we also have to take into consideration that that little one was born 3 weeks early. So even though we're not adjusting for prematurity, in the back of our minds as therapists and as parents, we have to realize, okay, our baby was 3 weeks early. So my questions to her were, and I haven't gotten a response back yet. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section below because I do monitor that. My questions to her was, is your baby doing anything? Are they rolling? Are they scooting? Are they army crawling? Are they doing any type of movement-based mobility on the floor? So I kind of wanted to get that answered before I went on to give her any suggestions. So these kind of things do happen, but I really want to know where her little one is. Is he 12 months old and not moving, not mobile on the floor? If that's the case, then we really need to reach out either to early intervention or the pediatrician to see what's going on. So a lot more questions need to be answered for me to even assist her in the right direction. So viewer, if you are watching, I did comment back to you, so let me know and we can take the next steps there. So let's go ahead and talk about why crawling or even floor mobility that I've been talking about is so important. So first, crawling builds the foundational strength needed for walking. It develops core strength, shoulder stability, hip stability, trunk rotation, weight shifting, all of these that are very much so essential for stable walking. In therapist language, we say crawling builds the proximal stability needed for distal mobility. So in mom language, that means that crawling builds the strength and control babies need to stand and walk safely. So proximal really means that the core, trunk, and shoulder muscles must be stable and strong to allow for controlled functional movement at the distal level, which is arms, hands, and legs. And without adequate crawling experience, some babies may actually walk with poor balance, toe walking, W sitting, and even showing some unstable gait patterns. Secondly, crawling helps integrate the left and the right sides of the brain. Crawling is a cross-lateral movement pattern, meaning the right arm moves with the left leg and the left arm moves with the right leg. This builds bilateral coordination, midline crossing, the brain hemisphere integration that's needed, which later then supports skills like reading, writing, eye tracking, attention, and learning. So this is huge for neurological development. Third, Crawling builds a shoulder stability, which directly supports fine motor skills. Shoulder stability leads to better hand control. Crawling develops scapular stability, wrist strength, and palm weight-bearing activities, which support grasp development, eye-hand coordination, feeding skills, and eventually writing. And honestly, I could probably stop there, but I actually have just a few more things. Why crawling in the traditional sense is very important, but if your little one is doing it in a different capacity, are they still getting that mobility to get to the couch, to learn to pull to stand? That's really what we're looking for, unless there's some medical diagnosis going on. So next, crawling supports visual development and spatial awareness. It strengthens eye tracking, builds depth perception. It supports visual scanning and improves visual motor integration. These skills are essential for reading, sports, coordination, and even balance. Let's go on to sensory. Crawling supports sensory processing and body awareness. Through crawling, babies learn where their body is in space. They develop balance responses and integrate tactile input, tactile meaning touch. So this helps with emotional regulation, movement confidence, and that body awareness. And finally, crawling builds problem solving and independence. It's often the first time your little one independently explores their environment and figures out how to move through obstacles, which support confidence, curiosity, and their cognitive development. So while hands and knees crawling is what we are looking for, some form of personal floor mobility is extremely important for building that strength, coordination, brain integration, and also those sensory foundations that we talked about that are needed for healthy development. So now that we know why crawling is so important, let's go ahead and talk about 3 ways that we can encourage crawling. So first, floor time on safe surfaces. I cannot express this enough. Like, floor time is the most encouraging way that you can do this. This helps them to reach for toys that are out of sight across the midline that we talked about. You can also place toys or a mirror just a little bit out of sight of your little one so they can start moving towards it or inching their way towards it or scooting towards it. You can practice weight shifts, so gently guiding their knees and their hands or their hips. Make sure you're celebrating all attempts that your little one is making, even inching forward just a little bit, because every movement strengthens muscles. And then I would also encourage, again, I know this is a hot topic, I would limit devices and restrictive seating. I would actually let them be on the floor, exploring freely. Now, I get it. Bumbo seats, bouncy seats, Exo saucers. I get it. There's a time and a place for those for sure. But the best place that your little one can be is on the floor, learning and exploring and moving and learning all of this organically. So as you can see, crawling comes in so many different forms and timing varies widely. That's why it is between 6 to 10 months. So what I want you to do is I want you to focus on progress, your little one's curiosity, and safe exploration on the floor. Lots of floor time. Your attention and support are 100% the key to success for your little one. Now, if you do notice that your baby isn't very mobile on the floor or is crawling, or their crawling is happening maybe just a little bit later, I will actually leave a link in the description below to the early intervention program in your area. And remember, you as a parent can refer to the early intervention program. You do not need to wait for a pediatrician's referral. But just keep in mind that the early intervention program is for little ones ages birth to 36 months. And if you do need any extra support from a pediatric developmental therapist, make sure you look in the description box below so you can see how you and I can work together if you need assistance. Okay. So you have learned a lot about crawling today, why not only traditional hands and knees crawling is important, but why it can look a little bit different for different babies. But you might be wondering, so my little one has actually already mastered crawling and is now learning to pull to stand and maybe even taking some steps. So how do I support them during this milestone? Well, I'm so glad you asked, because I want you to watch this video right here next, because when you pair that video with what you just learned today, it is going to be even more powerful, and you will understand your baby or toddler's development with so much more confidence and clarity. And as always, I appreciate you, and I will actually see you in the next video. All right, bye-bye.